Today's webinar is titled You Are Kin, You Are Welcome Here, using the Ahlan Manual to build resettlement partnerships with colleges and universities. And I'm really excited about today's conversation. I hope you are too. And I want to maybe set the stage by giving you a little bit of background on kind of what brings us here today and maybe what you can expect from today's conversation. So Every Campus A Refuge, also known as ECAR, is an entity that works to provide housing to refugees on established college campuses and universities. And it's a model that comes out of my hometown, Greensboro, North Carolina, but is becoming nationally and really internationally known and recognized. As I'm sure you all know here today, finding affordable, safe, quality housing is a real struggle for refugee resettlement agencies, let alone finding communities that will really rally around newly arriving families and provide that wraparound services is a challenge. And so we're really excited to see the work of ECAR expand. It's a really just innovative approach to meeting a really big need. And so we are huge supporters of Every Campus A Refuge, and we're here today to learn about the work that they do, but more specifically on the edges of this new manual that has been produced that is really meant to be a tool for folks like you all to look at and to use and to hopefully be able to bring in more campuses into this work. And so we're going to hear from some of the folks that helped create this manual, some of the folks that created the model, and some folks that are implementing it on the ground. So if you'll go to the next slide. Oh, that's me. I'm Jordan. If you haven't met me, I'm the Senior Regional Manager at Welcoming America. And on the next slide here, we'll go over some housekeeping items just very quickly. You all should have access to the chat. If you have any technical problems, feel free to use that and we'll try to address those. But also you can use the chat to enter questions that you might have. If a speaker said something that sparks your interest or you have a question, you can use the chat. At the end, we will have time for some questions and answers. But if you're like me and you wait 40 minutes to ask your question, it'll be long gone and you'll have forgotten. So feel free to use the chat to enter them, and then the speakers will address them either as they talk or at the end when it's time for Q&A. And then lastly, just a FYI for folks to know, this webinar is being recorded and will be shared out with folks to watch later. So if we go to the next screen, I quickly want to introduce one of our speakers, Dia Abdo. So Dia is the Lincoln Financial Professor of English at Guilford College in Greensboro, which I mentioned. And she's a second-generation Palestinian refugee born and raised in Jordan. Dr. Abdo founded Every Campus A Refuge, which advocates for housing refugee families on college and university campus grounds and supporting them in their resettlement. Dr. Abdo is the recipient of the J.M. Kaplan Fund's Innovation Prize from 2021, and her book, American Refuge, True Stories of the Refugee Experience, was published by Steerforth Press in 2022. And if you're more into watching videos than reading books, you can also Google and watch her TED Talk, which I highly recommend. So Dia, I'm going to pass it over to you to introduce the rest of the speakers, and just thank you so much for being here today, for offering this to our members, and just for all of the work that you do day in and day out. So Dia, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you so much, Jordan, and thank you so much for having us. It's a pleasure to be here. As Jordan said, in this webinar, we're hoping to show you how you can partner with colleges and universities to build campus community ecosystems that support refugee inclusion by using this newly released action guide, Ahlan, this manual for establishing resettlement campuses together. I want to introduce quickly the team members who are going to be talking about the manual. Kristen Matthias is a faculty member in Community and Justice Studies in the Department of Justice and Policy Studies at Guilford College in Greensboro, North Carolina. Sonalini Sabra currently works as an associate director in the Center for Principled Problem Solving and Excellence in Teaching and serves as collegiate faculty in political science at Guilford College. We're also going to be having a conversation later with Anne McGlynn, who's the founder and executive director of Tapestry Farms, a nonprofit urban farm system that invests in refugees who live in the Quad City region of eastern Iowa, western Illinois, and Colleen Tuez, Dr. Colleen Tuez, who is the founder and director of the National Association of System Heads Refugee Resettlement Initiative. She's also a senior fellow at the New Schools Zolberg Institute and a senior visiting fellow at Sciences Po Paris. If we can advance the slide. So as I said, we're excited to show you this wonderful manual. I want to begin first by explaining what the word Ahlan means. Ahlan is a term that's commonly used by Arabs to mean welcome. But it comes from a very sort of a classic expression of hospitality. Halaltum ahlan wa wata'tum sahlan. In that expression, ahlan quite literally means family or kin. And we love the meaning of that word. It's where the promise and premise of Ahlan comes from, to make refugees feel included, to feel that they are kin who are welcome here and can walk with ease. Halaltum ahlan wa wata'tum sahlan means you come as kin, walk with ease. I'm going to turn it over to Christian, who's going to take it over from here, along with Sonalini, to explain the manual and how it works and how you can use it.
Thank you, Jordan and Dia. Thanks, everyone, for being here today. Again, Christian Matthias over at Guilford College in Greensboro. First thing we'd like you to do, if you could really quickly, is open a browser in the background there and navigate to www.slido.com. And you can continue doing this for a few minutes as we're talking. But if you'd go to slido.com and enter that code there, Ahlan November 7, or use the QR code. You can also do this from your phone. There's a question there. It's a quick survey poll to gather some data. We've got two really quick questions. So if you can, go ahead and answer that first question there, and I'll toggle over to show you this. First question there is just what is one college university you're connected to? Just a quick 30 seconds to try and get some information from you about that. We can think together about that a little bit later. And in just a moment, I'm going to switch to a second question. So if you could quickly try to enter a response to that first one. Yep, they're popping in. That's great. Okay. I know it's a bit of a rush, trying to wait to that little counter thing. All right, great. I'm going to switch to the second question. How might a higher education institution and its resources support your work? And I'm going to leave that one active as we continue talking. So as you listen to us, you can go back and respond to that one. It'll be active for quite some time. But we'll come back and look at your responses together a little bit later. All right, over to Sonalini.
Thanks, Christian, and thanks everyone for being here. So we wanted this to be a kind of action-oriented webinar, and so we have proposed 4 things that you can do as part of your work after the webinar, and we'll return to these 4 things at the end of the webinar as well. But the first is connecting with someone you know at a nearby campus and or reaching out to your alma mater and encouraging them to become a resettlement campus. Number 2 is sharing on social media, LinkedIn, and in your broader networks, information about the Ahlan Manual. And in a few minutes, we'll point you to a link to access the manual. Number 3 is including information about Ahlan in your newsletters, public meetings, or on your websites. And then the 4th is encouraging your members to also reach out to connect with colleges and universities in their networks. Next slide.
One of the first things we wanted to do is kind of help share some important information about how to understand where Ahlan fits in the bigger picture of higher education and movement work. As you begin to interact with people on different campuses, one of the things you might encounter in your campuses and in your networks is a response, well, we already engage with refugees, we already engage with resettlement. And in building this project and helping people understand ECAR and the resettlement campus work, what we had to do is to develop a typology to help people understand how unique and transformative the resettlement campus movement is. So you may encounter partners who say, well, we do service learning, or we send people to camps or places where refugees are temporarily settled around the world, or we engage as scholars and researchers and activists. What's different about ECAR and the Resettlement Campus approach and what's laid out in Ahlan is that we are working with campuses to do direct resettlement, to welcome refugees onto their campus and to help bring them into the community for a period of time and help them resettle locally. I'm going to turn it over to Sonalini here in a second, but as you look through the manual later and you engage in conversations in those networks, it's going to be important to help potential partners understand what is distinct and unique about this particular approach.
Great. And so two terms that we've kind of helped elaborate on in the manual that we think is important to this work are the first is resettlement ecosystem, which is a constellation of organizations, agencies, and individuals, including refugees, providing support and services to newcomers. And the second key term is that a resettlement campus ecosystem is a hyper-local constellation of organizations, agencies, and individuals, including refugees, that are either already providing support and services to newcomers or poised to do so if they're brought into a mutually beneficial partnership with a higher education institution as a central actor in that constellation of individuals and organizations. And as Dia mentioned, one of the primary purposes of Ahlan is to expand the domestic refugee resettlement infrastructure by supporting the creation of more resettlement campus ecosystems. Next slide, Christian. So there are a lot of guiding purposes and principles in the manual. So I won't get a chance to go through each and every one of them, but a few of the really central ones is that the manual centers the dignity of refugees and radical hospitality on the part of hosting institutions. So in the manual, we try to demonstrate how the ECAR model can provide innovative and powerful educational opportunities for students while centering the agency and dignity of individuals being hosted on campus. The second guiding principle is the need for long-term institutional transformation through this ecosystem of regional and local partnerships. And that's with nonprofit organizations, community centers, mutual aid groups, local faith communities, local refugee resettlement agencies, and the list goes on. And the third kind of big principle or guiding force behind the manual is that stressing the importance of designing institutional policies and practices that are really based on the lived experiences and narrative testimonies and empirical data that's gathered from both qualitative and quantitative sources. And in the next few slides, we'll talk a little bit about the research process that went into this manual. Christian, next slide. So this is the wonderful research team that's behind the manual, and it comprised of Guilford students, particularly students from the Community and Justice Studies capstone seminar, and also faculty and staff at Guilford, along with community partners from refugee resettlement agencies. And it was a pretty extensive process. So it took about 18 months to do our data collection and analysis. We conducted 11 focus groups at the last ECAR gathering that was held in October 2022. And we had 11 focus groups of approximately 6 to 8 people from a total of over 100 participants. Participants answered questions for the duration of an hour, and students both audio recorded the focus group discussions and acted as note takers to collect qualitative data. And then they manually coded them and also used a qualitative software called Atlas TI to come up with some of the main themes. And we also, the manual also underwent extensive peer review from folks at Welcoming America and also a team of external reviewers. And I think we had about 80 pages of feedback that we sorted through after completing the first draft of the manual. And it was really invaluable, feedback to get to improve the manual greatly. Next slide.
Thanks, Sonalini. One of the reasons why we wanted to review some of that background is to help you and to help broader audiences as well understand how well the manual is grounded. We put in a substantial amount of work with many community partners to make sure that it's principled, that it's value-driven, as well as being community and network sourced. It comes from many experts and practitioners in the field of resettlement. that it's thoroughly supported with research, really recent research, as well as the data we collected, and that, as Sonalini said, it's extensively peer-reviewed. So in other words, we want our partners and we want people working with Resettlement Campus movement efforts to understand that they can trust the work that is provided in the manual and the sources provided in the manual. It is something we'll continue to revise and update as needed and add supplements in the future. But it's important to know that we've tried to ground it as carefully as we can in multiple different frames to make sure that it's a reliable resource for various different actors in those ecosystems. One of the other things we want to help impress upon you and other audiences is that we intend the manual to be transformative. This is a toolkit. It's not just a documentation of research and some praxis. It's a toolkit meant to guide people in the work of developing buy-in, making plans to map their ecosystem, and then actually carrying out the work of implementing those plans with different partners in a network. And so we designed the manual to help users speak to decision makers and speak to community partners and speak to different constituencies and stakeholders to be able to leverage those strategies as effectively as possible in the unique ways that different regions or different campuses or different partners are going to need them leveraged. Something else that's really important to the design of manual is that it's built to be an instrument at the intersection of both social movement work and higher education. In social movement work, you might think of things like civil rights organizing, for instance, and larger social change advocacy and grassroots efforts. There are registers and ideas of relationship building, capacity and coalition building. The way to address problems tends to be issue driven by coming up with solutions that networks and coalitions work toward. And social movement work tends to be about realization. Whereas in higher education, many of the framework or the language has to be around networks and infrastructure. Solutions or things that tend to be committee-driven and initiative-driven. And so many of the ways of framing things are administrative and procedural. What we've tried to do is make a hybrid of these two and to put these two different ways of doing things in conversation so that higher education can engage in resettlement campus movement work more effectively, and those who are more familiar with movement strategies can interface more carefully with higher education institutions. So it draws on the different nuances to help build a bridge between those different strategies and approaches. One of the other things that we want the manual to be able to do is meet people where they are. People will come to resettlement movement work and resettlement campus ecosystems with a lot of different approaches. Some people will be all in with intense passion. Some people will be kind of moderately in with sort of general interest. And some people might be minimally in with the contribution they can make. And what's really key to what DIA has advocated and what the ECAR model has done is that the goal is, it's not necessary to meet people and insist that they are all in all the time, but to work consistently with the level of commitment people bring. And so the manual is designed to help advocates and to help champions figure out how to meet allies and accomplices, meet people with different strategies where they are, and be able to work with that level of commitment at that level. And, hopefully that commitment will grow, but to consistently work with the level of commitment people offer at whatever level that is.
All right. And so if I could ask folks on the call to navigate to that page where you should be able to download well, first it'll take you to a Google form, and it just asks you for some basic information. And we promise that the information you provide will only be used to see if you wanted to do an optional evaluation of the manual in a few months. We won't use that information for anything else. And so if folks wanted to kind of toggle over to that, and over the next few slides, we'll just give you a very broad-ranging overview of what is included in the manual. And as Christian has pointed out, the materials and resources really range from advocacy to planning, to assessment, to evaluation, to collaboration. And the main driving principle is that we want the sections and the resources to speak to each campus and person in unique ways. And so next slide, Christian. So the first part talks about some of the typical implementation stages in establishing a resettlement campus. So talks about capacity building and infrastructure building and what it means to house and resettle guests, and also the post-hosting. So as folks are transitioning out of campus housing, how to support guests and support in securing safe and affordable housing after they transition off campus. Next slide. And so I would say the manual is broken up into 4 broad categories. So the first is understanding the context of refugee resettlement. The second is on mapping your resettlement ecosystem. The third is around creating buy-in within your ecosystem. And then the fourth is on building your ecosystem. And so I'll very briefly kind of touch on the first 2. And so the first part of the manual really talks about the history of refugee resettlement in the US in very broad strokes. So it gives some historical context of the US RAP program and also highlights some of the newer initiatives such as Welcome Corps, which is the new US government program where groups of 5 US residents or citizens can privately sponsor refugee families and individuals. And it talks a little bit about some terminology, particularly around what refugee inclusion entails and means. Next slide, Christian. And then the second portion of the manual really focuses on mapping your resettlement ecosystem. So it contains various tools that should be useful to you in your work. One of the tools that folks have told us has been most useful is the PERC mapping tool, which is a free online resource that helps folks identify and connect with local resettlement agencies and refugee support organizations, and who can inform you about local community needs and partner with you on refugee resettlement work. Then we also have a kind of a toolkit for mapping existing or potential partnerships in the community with organizations, agencies, and businesses. Next slide, Christian. And then another mapping tool is around mapping campus resources and what are some of the resources and services that campuses or universities have to offer newcomers on their campus. Next slide, Christian.
In the next couple of sections of the manual, one is creating buy-in with the ecosystem, something that's very important and sourced from the different network of experts who helped us build the manual, were the talking points and the ways of framing the conversation. And so even somebody who's relatively unfamiliar with refugee resettlement is going to find a lot of very easy to access information in the manual to help develop those talking points and prepare to have conversations with different prospective community partners. That includes talking points about why this matters, talking points about potential challenges, and even talking points and information to plan for potential resistance, right? People who might be misinformed about resettlement, or people might be operating on some information that's a little less reliable or some bias. And so it really helps to build a sense of how that ecosystem will be stronger and how that ecosystem will be able to thrive as a result of engaging this kind of work. A little later in the manual, you'll find the task lists and to-do sheets for building your ecosystem. These are quick action checklists to be able to interface with partners, to be able to go into those conversations on and off campus and around the community, to be able to think about the kinds of things that you need to think about ahead of time, to plan for those conversations and keep track of the different steps of building those partnerships and developing those ecosystems. And so those are just 2 examples there on the screen that I've shown you of the different kind of checklists. And there's a more extensive list as you scroll through the manual there between pages 52 and 72 with quick action guides. Okay. I wanted to go back and show you some of the responses to your first, those first 2 poll questions, and just take a look at sort of what you said earlier. Let's take a look at this first one. There were some of the universities. If you have other suggestions for different universities that we might be able to help you partner with, we're just kind of curious about the network and the regions you're interfaced with, feel free to go ahead and either drop those in the chat or let us know. Feel free to reach out anytime if there are different kind of university partners you'd like us to help introduce you to. But it's helpful to know what some of your networks and connections already look like. The other question about how these institutions or how campuses might support your work, this is going to be helpful for us as well. What are the ways that these campuses can support the work you're doing? Again, if you have other thoughts about that, feel free to put those ideas in the chat or share those with us offline by email afterward if you're interested in partnering. And as you move through the manual and look through the resource, if you have other suggestions, we're really interested in learning more about what's on your minds and what kind of things that we can do to be helpful as we develop the manual further and help put it in the hands of other actors in potential networks. Okay. So just to review, again, as Nalini said at the beginning, the things that we really are asking you to consider doing are connecting with people you know at a nearby campus, potentially, also your alma mater, and encouraging them to look at the manual, to consider becoming a resettlement campus. Share information about Ahlan and about ECAR on social media and in your broader networks. Include that information in any newsletters or public meetings and potentially on your websites. And then also, please encourage members and people you interact with regularly, stakeholders and community partners, to reach out and connect with colleges and universities in their networks and to be involved as potential bridge builders in developing resettlement campus ecosystems. Okay. You can use that link, that QR code there and the link provided earlier to access the manual and share it in your network. So please do, please make just extensive use and share that wherever you can, as frequently as you can. Even if you're not sure it's potential of interest in the sources, you never know who might be on the other end looking for this kind of resource or might spark passion and interest in them. And we're going to ask you to just answer one last question. If you go back to slido.com, if there are people you would like us to send the manual to, and we're going to go ahead and leave that active. So if you go to slido.com and re-enter that code, if there's anyone you want us to get in contact with and share the manual with directly, go ahead and enter their email contact information. Again, we'll leave that active and we'll do some of the outreach work for you as well. So we're in just a moment going to turn it back over to Dia. And I think we are ready. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And as a reminder, folks, please put your questions in the chat about the manual, any questions that you might have about how it's used. Hopefully you've been able to access it and download it. I put the link in the chat. In a minute, Christian, I'm going to ask you to stop sharing screen, but for now, I just want to keep that up there because we have some time and I want to introduce Colleen and Anne just a little bit more. So as I mentioned, Anne is the founder and executive director of Tapestry Farms. She's also a descendant of immigrants from Ireland and Germany, and she grew up on a small family farm in Iowa. She holds a bachelor's degree in journalism and a master's degree in business administration from the University of Iowa. And Anne lives in Davenport, Iowa, with her spouse and 2 young adult children. I met Anne in a variety of contexts, but I think first I met Anne through Welcoming America, and I also met her at the Hello Neighbor convening in Pittsburgh. And when she learned about ECAR, she thought it might be a good fit for St. Ambrose University in Iowa and brought the idea to St. Ambrose. And now St. Ambrose is a resettlement campus. They are going to be hosting refugees on their campus. And we look forward to hearing from Anne about how that partnership developed and the ways in which community partners, community organizations can approach their local higher education institutions to develop and deepen those partnerships. Dr. Colleen Tuez is a very dear friend, and it's always a pleasure to be in any space with her. I want to say a little bit more about her. She's been heavily engaged in refugee support and refugee resettlement. For example, at the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, she co-founded Europe Kriegstock, a locally led effort connecting Ukrainian and European communities responding to the needs of Ukrainian IDPs. And is currently focused on providing short-term getaways in France for hundreds of Ukrainians displaced and recently orphaned children. Previously, Dr. Tuez served as the inaugural director of the Welcoming and Inclusive Cities Division at the Open Society Foundations, OSF. Before joining OSF for 17 years, she held leadership positions at the United Nations, including the head of the UN Institute for Training and Research, UNITAR. In the last few years, Colleen has been mobilizing, activating, catalyzing systemness and state institutions that are part of state system schools to support refugees in their state, and has done wonderful work in Rhode Island and Kentucky. We're excited for all the wonderful things that the Nash RRI will be doing ahead. If we can stop sharing screen, and welcome Colleen and welcome Anne. I would like to ask each of you this question, and I'm going to start with Colleen. Colleen, on the call, of course, we have Welcoming America members, so community-based organizations, perhaps city officials, local governments. How can the folks on the call here today and others who will watch this recording, how can they use their positions in their organization, the city and local government to influence local campuses to get involved in refugee resettlement support? If there are some concrete examples that you could provide of your own work, that would be wonderful.
Hi, Dia. Sure. Thank you. And it's a real pleasure to be here. As Dia mentioned, I at one time was at a large foundation running work that was very much around welcoming and inclusive cities in this country, but globally as well. And I worked very closely with Welcoming America back then. And I'm so pleased to be back in a situation working with Welcoming Campuses, with ECAR being an extremely close partner of the Nash Refugee Resettlement Initiative, but also a partnership that we started discussing with Welcoming America a few months ago. It's probably about a year ago now, to really dig in deeper on the nexus between the support of welcoming campuses and the mobilization of municipal, county, and state advocates for the work. And what I would say to concretely answer your question, Dia, is to give the example of some of the work that Nash RI is helping to support. I thought it a good idea to open shop, to open a welcoming university effort in this country, in the United States, at an organization that represents these public university systems, for the reason that many of the public university systems in this country have a very close relationship with governors, with state legislators, and are very much on the pulse of the politics around welcoming refugees. And why not have the public university systems be advocates for us in our work? And so the example that I perhaps would give, Dia, is I would invite municipal and also state government officers and advocates to join an existing community of practice that we have helped to establish at Nash. You mentioned Kentucky. You also mentioned Rhode Island, but we also have in sites for 2024 communities of practice in Colorado and in New York State. And time permitting, I can share more information on what a community of practice does, but essentially it's a statewide effort on a very specific goal that has generally been ignited or initiated as a result of a state decision, like a new program where we see great benefits for refugee students, and or a new state legislation that will extend to refugee students, and where, importantly, the public university system plays a key role in taking the work forward. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I do believe we have some time. So if you want to take a minute, Colleen, to talk a little bit more about the COP, or the community of practice model, and how you've seen that activate and catalyze partnerships.
I'd be happy to, and maybe after I can also give send some invitations, and my colleagues are on the line as well with some links for very specific next steps. And obviously you can access the information on our website, nash.edu, Refugee Resettlement Initiative, and I'll speak about what some of those specific next steps or outreach support that we can provide that are available to you. But so yes, what is, so the idea of the community of practice is it's a support tool that we at Nash provide with national partners on a specific topic. So I'll give the example of Kentucky and tell the story briefly. In the summer of 2022, the state legislature for the Commonwealth of Kentucky passed a bill, a $10 million bill, that was partly for a scholarship program for forcibly displaced residents of Kentucky. You know, the people who had arrived as forcibly displaced persons and are currently residents of Kentucky. And the public university system, also known as the Kentucky Council on Post-Secondary Education, that represents several public university institutions and community colleges, was assigned the task of using that money to lift the first nationwide state scholarship program for forcibly displaced persons. And that Kentucky public university system turned to us, the Refugee Resettlement Initiative, because of the need for the technical expertise around refugee support and refugee resettlement, to help design that scholarship program, which now is known as the Humanitarian Assistance Scholarship, or the HAAS, the Kentucky Humanitarian Assistance Scholarship. We drew on expertise from ECAR, from the International Institute, the Institute on International Education, and others to help design and roll out this scholarship program. And there has been active involvement of the higher education institutions. And to my knowledge, some of the municipal actors and stakeholders have also taken an interest. Bowling Green, where WKU, or Western Kentucky University, is located, being one example. But the truth is that we haven't really delved into mobilizing municipal, and in particular municipal authorities, state level more so, but municipal authorities, in the effort, in the movement building that was just referred to when it comes to ECAR's work as well. So that's one example of a community of practice. We also have done something that's a little bit less committal than a community of practice, and that is simply to get actors around the table at the state level with municipalities, with universities, to talk about what is the existing support for refugee students in a given state. We did that in Missouri, and Welcoming America will remember because they co-convened that meeting with us last February 14th. And so sometimes it's just a great start for us to get around the table many higher education leaders along with municipal and state actors to really answer this question: what more can we do to support refugee students, and in the case of our work, also other forcibly displaced, recently arrived people in this country.
Thank you so much, Colleen. I'm going to turn it over to Anne. Anne, I have the same question for you. Of course, you're also a member of Welcoming America. What advice would you give to folks on this call on how their organizations might be able to influence local campuses to support refugee resettlement? What advice do you have for building partnerships with higher education? As someone who's done this very well with a local university, we'd love to hear how you approach this with St. Ambrose, and tell us a little bit about what that campus is doing.
Well, thank you so much. I will tell you that this partnership with St. Ambrose is one of the greatest joys of my life right now. I would say that for us, it was a lot of what I would call soft conversations. So when I returned from that summer of seeing Dia all over the place, I had some soft conversations with people at St. Ambrose that I thought might be interested in this. And one of those individuals, her name is Nikki Gant. She had worked with resettling refugees previously, so she understood what was involved. There was also a timing factor. The university has new leadership that has a focus on radical hospitality. The campus has some houses that they are trying to figure out what to do with as they try to focus more with having people on campus. So it was just a lot of soft conversations, and Nikki's willingness to take the steps through the process, including getting buy-in from leadership. And so hopefully soon the house is all ready to go. It's been fun working with a variety of groups, other organizations. Our resettlement agency, also, speaking of timing, is now resettling in Iowa. They were only resettling in Illinois previously. So just a lot of things happened at the right time to make it work.
Thank you so much. And can you provide perhaps a little bit more details about what the campus is doing, just in terms of student volunteers? I know they're going to be using a house on campus that they prepared in partnership with local community folks. But I'm sure the audience here would love to hear how the students are involved, or other faculty members.
Sure. Yeah, so in a variety of ways. Our organization happens to have 3 people who work for St. Ambrose who are on our board of directors. And so those 3 individuals have been instrumental in leading this effort. And a variety of things have happened. We have an organization that furnishes homes for people using donated goods. They are also a nonprofit, so they agreed to furnish this home just as a starting point for this program. They had football players and other students who helped move all of the furniture in. There was an environmental group that helped with some of the landscaping, planting beautiful flowers around the outside of the house. One of our board members led the charge to paint the front porch and replace the back deck. And then now, Dia, you don't know about this, but we are now talking with the education department, and in particular, the gentleman who leads the ESL credentialing program for educators, about restarting actually adult ESL with childcare, either on campus or in our office. This is particularly exciting for many people. They used to offer a similar program, but it had stopped for, I don't know why, but it did. And so we're hoping to start that in January. So the ripple effect is starting, and that's really beautiful.
That's wonderful. And I look forward to hearing more from Nikki and from you about those details. Thank you. Colleen, I'm going to go back to you and ask you to talk a little bit about, from your experience, the ways in which the work of a resettlement campus, a university that's doing this work, supporting refugees with material needs, community support, how does that work extend beyond the walls of the campus? For example, to advocate for supportive infrastructure outside of the college or the university, so that the work of welcoming refugees doesn't really exist in a vacuum. It'd be good to hear from some of the examples of the universities that you mentioned and the states that you mentioned, how that work has extended outward to the community.
Sure. And I can, talk about what we're hearing from a number of welcoming campuses that talk about the close relationship, or the town and gown relationship, between them and the surrounding towns, and how both through volunteerism, but also through greater advocacy and support, and even connecting primary and secondary education, the K-12, to what's happening on the university campus is all influenced by these conversations around support to refugee students. I'm thinking of, Nash is the Nash RI has a Catalyst Fund, which invites welcoming campuses to apply for funds that can elevate and spotlight the innovations in refugee welcome on the university campus, and then be a kind of an inspiration for other campuses, either in that state through that existing system. I'm thinking of Washington State University, or in another state, like the Kentucky Scholarship is having an influence in conversations in other state legislatures right now. And so in the case of, for instance, Spokane, Washington State University, we know that led to conversations on other campuses across Washington State when they received a Catalyst Fund that in fact was to help support was helping to support what was already underway, which was the establishment of an ECAR chapter there, and conversations around how that could happen on other campuses. So what we've understood as pivotal to increasing the number of welcoming campuses, which is the first goal of the RRI, hence our very strong partnership with ECAR, is that there's a need for political buy-in from the leadership of the higher education institution, but that all support that can come also from outside the campus, including from the community-based organizations, from the municipality, from the state government. These are all things that can really help support and multiply the welcoming movement across campuses and across communities. Dia, if it's okay, can I now just give a couple of pieces of information for those on our call today who might have an interest in wanting to know of the services that we offer at Nash. One of them, as I've mentioned, is We offer to be a facilitator or a convener of a statewide conversation on what's happening at universities in a given state and who are some of the other stakeholders and actors who can come around the table for that conversation. Interestingly, I mentioned the one that we had in Missouri last February. We've had others. They're sometimes initiated, in the case of Missouri, by the state refugee coordinator, so from the state that wants to work with the university systems. If anybody on the call feels that this would be something helpful in their state and they don't think this is already happening, please reach out to my colleague Olivia Issa. I think the information will be in the chat. Another really game changer for us has been, as I mentioned, our partnership with ECAR, and essentially together, led by ECAR, we're able to support trainings of trainers for the creation, establishment of an ECAR chapter. And while we haven't yet done this, Dia, I suppose you'll agree with me when I say that to the extent that Welcoming America partners would want to be a part of one of these training of trainers that's really directed at a given university, please feel free to engage with us on this. And you can do so. There's, again, a link for you to schedule a first conversation and a request for such a training program. Maybe I'll share one more piece of information there, though there are several more that I could provide. So do reach out if you'd like more information. And that is that since the creation of the RRI in the summer of 2021, we've started to build a community known as the RRI Champions Network. And just recently, for this network, created a directory for anybody who would like to have their contact information shared as part of this community. Many of the people in the directory, many are ECAR chapter representatives, many are stakeholders within communities. A lot of them are champions on campuses, including students. And that's another thing I'd like to highlight is the role of youth in mobilizing and supporting refugee welcome, students on campuses, but also children in their schools. More and more, we see this as a really important area of work, and I know it's been on Welcoming America's list of priorities as well. And so if you would like to be a member of this community, this Champions Network, we also have a directory form that you can fill out. So those are just some concrete kind of next steps, and they very much overlay with our extremely close partnership with ECAR, and obviously with the Ahlan Manual, and how it will be used, interpreted, and carried forward. Maybe I can say one other really, really quick thing, Dia, if I have 2 minutes. 1 minute. What I noticed back in 2017, when as a grantor, I started to understand or try to understand the movement of welcoming campuses across this country. There was this need to define what that means, kind of overcome the natural competitive spirit of higher education institutions in this country for the reasons that we all know. It was really ECAR that was the first, and it still is, the first effort that answered the question, I'm on a campus, I want to be a welcoming university, how do I do it? It was the first, and still is, the national program that gives an answer to that question, how can I do it? This is how. And that's part of the success, not the only ingredient, certainly, of ECAR's success, but it's been hugely helpful. And I'm sure it'll be hugely helpful in the greater alliances between municipal actors, county actors, community actors, state government actors, and the champions that we're finding on university and college campuses across the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Colleen. So I think this is a great segue to ask Anne the same question. St. Ambrose is a resettlement campus. It's an ECAR chapter. And can you talk a little bit about the ways in which the work of St. Ambrose, in partnership with Tapestry Farms and other local partners, has extended beyond the walls of the campus? So we know that students are volunteering. We know that things are happening on campus. But in what ways is that work of supporting refugees by a university permeating outwards into the community? What are some of the things that you're seeing, or perhaps the potential that you're seeing there with St. Ambrose?
Yeah, I think, again, just with the timing of this is really just wonderfully perfect in that our local resettlement agency, which is World Relief, they had only resettled on the Illinois side. Now they have been approved to resettle on the Iowa side and anticipate resettling about 120 people in the next year. And so there are a lot of community conversations that are happening because of that change. And so with the training that students and faculty have gone through through World Relief, And then also there's another family that has been resettled close to campus. So there's just been so many more conversations about how we can resettle well as a community, which is our highest aspiration, is that our community will resettle families well. So the school district here locally has just been wonderfully responsive and eager to learn about working with students who are beginner English learners. There's been the opportunity to talk at the city level about what's going on. So I would say, just because of where we're at as a community with welcoming right now, we're very much at the beginning, and this having ECAR in our community has given us an opportunity to engage people that maybe wouldn't have engaged otherwise.
Thank you, Anne. We have some time, a few minutes for questions from folks. Please put your question in the chat. Colleen, there is a question from Amy. Can I find or have information sent about the conversations in Missouri last year? Is that something that we might be able to put
Absolutely.
in the chat, or is there something that you can provide sort of verbally?
In the chat, I don't have it, but
Okay.
send the information. There's a kind of a summary of that conversation and a framing paper, and I think also a press release. We can share all of that with you, Amy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. So folks, yeah, we have 5 minutes for questions. Please let us know if there are any questions that you might have. Put them in the chat.
Can I add one quick thing?
Yes, of course.
So St. Ambrose actually had 2 houses that were available, and we made the decision collectively that one of the houses would be ECAR, and then another one of the houses would be set aside for our local homeless organization. And so that also has provided an opportunity to bring people into the conversation that are interested in supporting people experiencing homelessness, but maybe didn't know anything about refugee resettlement. So I would really encourage, if a campus has more opportunity or more housing that might be available, that thinking of other natural partners is a good way to go.
Thank you. And I think that's such a great way to also address some of the concerns, of why are we supporting one population and not another? Of course, having conversations and just an opportunity to have dialogue on this is important, but also finding ways and resources to create this collateral benefit where you're creating a system that supports one population is actually allowing you to think creatively and innovatively about supporting other populations as well and other groups. What a great way to do that with St. Ambrose. Who are they partnering with in that effort, Anne?
The organization is called Humility Homes.
Okay.
Yeah, and they are, both St. Ambrose and Humility are founded by Catholic organizations. And so just with ECAR's founding surrounding the Pope's encouragement also was a really good entry point for both organizations. I also am friends with the director of Humility Homes, and so that was also super helpful, that we like to hang out with each other. So
that's wonderful. Thank you. All right. Well,
And
go ahead,
yeah,
Colleen.
maybe I just want to emphasize that, you know, from my vantage point of, as I said, like having worked quite a bit with cities over the years around issues of inclusion and welcome, and in the last few years working with university communities here in the U.S., I actually think it's a new frontier where we really have a lot more potential work to be done, you know, and I have been talking about the public university systems because I talk about them like they are state actors alongside the legislature, alongside the governor's office, alongside a lot of the cities and towns where they're located, the campuses that is, but all universities, including private ones. I think we really can dig a little bit further as we start to talk about with Welcoming America, how we can support our efforts maybe in a more strategic way, and or maybe strategic is the wrong word, but in a more consistent way. You know, again, I think it's a new frontier that we have yet to explore. I see the Welcoming University movement as like 8 years old now, at the most, 7, 8 years old. And I know that the Welcoming America movement is older than that. And so I think that we can learn from each other, and maybe universities can learn a lot from the municipalities and state governments and other stakeholders, and we can come together in a more consistent way to build a movement.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it too, Colleen. And this goes back to Christian's point about transformation and different ways in which we build movement. It's exciting for me to see the collaborative nature, you know, the ways in which universities are working with partners. I think you're absolutely right that sometimes there's a sense in which higher education institutions can be pretty competitive. But this work allows us to deepen and build partnerships, you know, across ecosystems in ways that I haven't seen before. And so I'm grateful for that opportunity, and certainly for the ways in which Nash has led the way, and the RRI has illustrated how powerful that can be at the state level. We have 1 more minute. I'm not sure, Jordan, do you want to sort of close us out, or? Ooh, there we go.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I'll just thank you all for being here. To the speakers, thank you so much for sharing. For those of you that are interested or have additional questions, feel free to reach out really to anybody here today. And if in doubt, reach out to your Welcoming America regional manager, and we can help get you connected. But we'd love to see more higher ed institutions brought into this work, and hoping to see some real innovative work spreading across the globe. So thank you all, and I will end it at that. Happy Tuesday evening to everybody. Take care.